Boston, Massachusetts. January 15th, 1919. It's an unusually warm winter afternoon, the temperature climbing rapidly after a brutal cold snap. In the North End, a massive steel tank looms over Commercial Street, 5 stories tall. Inside it, over 2 million gallons of molasses, delivered 2 days earlier, still warm from its journey. At 12:30 in the afternoon, without warning, the tank tears itself apart. Witnesses describe a sound like machine gun fire, rivets shooting out of the steel like bullets. Then a wall of molasses, 25 feet tall, bursts into the street. It's moving at 35 miles an hour. This is not a slow, sticky spill. This is a wave, and it is about to kill 21 people. To understand why this tank existed at all, you have to understand what molasses was actually for. It wasn't just food. During World War I, molasses fermented into ethanol, and ethanol became munitions. Demand was enormous. So in 1915, the Purity Distilling Company rushed a new storage tank into service on Commercial Street, 50 feet tall, 90 feet across, built to hold 2.3 million gallons. It was never properly tested. Standard practice called for filling a new tank with water first, checking for weaknesses before risking it with the real product. That step was skipped. Almost immediately, residents noticed the tank leaking, molasses seeping from its seams, dripping down the steel. The company's solution wasn't to fix it. They painted the tank brown so the leaks would be harder to see. Children in the neighborhood were sent to collect the leaking molasses in cups. It became a strange, sweet inconvenience nobody thought to take seriously. For nearly 4 years, the tank groaned, leaked, and held. Until the afternoon, it didn't. When the tank failed, it failed completely. The steel didn't crack open quietly. It shredded. Over 8 million liters of molasses hit the street at once, a wave taller than most of the surrounding building's first floors. It moved fast enough to lift a nearby firehouse off its foundation. It knocked a section of elevated train track out of alignment. Horses were trapped where they stood. Buildings were crushed off their frames. People caught in the open didn't have time to outrun it. And once it reached them, the molasses didn't just knock them down and recede, the way floodwater would. It held on. Rescue workers spent hours wading through molasses that had thickened as it cooled, searching for survivors buried beneath it. 21 people died. Around 150 more were injured. Some victims weren't found for days. In the aftermath, the company responsible, United States Industrial Alcohol, insisted the disaster wasn't their fault. Their official explanation, anarchists had bombed the tank. It was 1919. Political bombings were a real and recent fear in America, and blaming sabotage was, for a company facing catastrophic liability, a very convenient story. A massive class action lawsuit followed, one of the largest in Massachusetts history at the time. It took nearly 6 years and thousands of pages of testimony from engineers, chemists, and eyewitnesses to reach a verdict. The final ruling rejected the anarchist theory completely. The tank had failed due to a structural design flaw. Steel walls too thin for the pressure they were built to hold, and rushed into use without ever being properly tested. The company was found responsible and ordered to pay damages, a staggering sum for the era. It remains one of the earliest cases in American history where a company's own engineering negligence, not sabotage, not an act of God, was proven in court to have caused mass casualties. For nearly a century, the disaster was remembered mostly as a strange historical footnote. Then, in 2016, a team of Harvard researchers decided to actually study the physics of what happened. Fluid dynamicists modeled the flood using real rheology, the science of how fluids deform and flow. Molasses, it turns out, is a strange substance. It's what's called a non-Newtonian fluid. Its viscosity isn't fixed. It changes depending on temperature and the forces acting on it. Under warm conditions, molasses can flow relatively easily, but the Harvard team found something crucial. As the molasses spread out across the freezing January street, it cooled rapidly. And as it cooled, it thickened fast. That explains something that had puzzled historians for decades. Why so many victims weren't simply knocked over and swept along the way you'd expect from a flood. They were caught and then held by a fluid actively turning into something closer to wet cement around them the longer it sat. The wave wasn't just powerful when it hit. It got more dangerous the longer people were trapped inside it. Boston's North End didn't fully recover the smell of molasses for years. Locals swore that on hot summer days decades later, you could still catch a faint sweetness in the air near the harbor. But the disaster's real legacy wasn't the smell. It was regulation. The lawsuit's outcome directly influenced how Massachusetts and eventually much of the country approached construction oversight. Independent inspections, actual testing before a structure holding millions of pounds of anything gets filled for the first time. Rules that exist today, quietly, in the background of nearly every large structure you walk past. Because in 1919, on one warm January afternoon, a tank that was never properly tested failed in 9 seconds, and 21 people never got the chance to outrun what came out of it.